Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Monday Bagel, the podcast exploring how law, technology, and society intersect. I'm your host, Michał Jackowski, and today I'm truly honored to welcome Stephanie Boyce, the 177th President of the Law Society of England and Wales, and the first person of color to hold this role in its history. Stephanie has been a tireless advocate for diversity, inclusion, and innovation. She also spearheaded the introduction of AI ethics principles for the legal profession, emphasizing caution, care, and responsibility in adopting new technologies. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
As the first person of color to serve as president of the Law Society in history, who also introduced AI ethics principles, how does it feel to be a pioneer in both advancing diversity and legal technology?
Well, many things have been said and written about me, so including trailblazing, pioneer, as you said, and so many other things. I'm lucky that it's all been very nice and favourable. But with that comes a great responsibility, and I do think that as much as we talk up the opportunities with artificial intelligence and other LLMs, that it's also important that we talk about the associated risk, especially here in the United Kingdom, where we don't have any set regulation. And we are increasingly hearing, certainly within the legal profession, that actually law firms are struggling with the governance of artificial intelligence.
Okay, you very often say to proceed with caution and care when speaking about AI. Does this mean the legal profession should be conservative toward technology or wisely cautious? And what's the difference between them? Or maybe really forward thinking and adopting this new technology very fast?
So all of those things. We have seen, certainly here in the United Kingdom, what we have seen, and indeed globally, we've seen the transformative effects that technology has had in finance, i.e. banking. Decisions that we may have waited on weeks, months in terms of financial decisions are now being made in seconds. Healthcare, some of the transformative effects in healthcare, diagnosis, medicines, treatments, and so forth. But when it comes to law, what I mean by that is that we as lawyers should remember our professional obligations in terms of ethics, why we got into this profession in the first place, and the principles that we must adhere to. And of course, what we do, we are acting in the public interest. We are seeking to keep the wheels of justice turning, to adhere to the rule of law. And my concern, and when I say let's proceed with caution, is that we have a few cautionary tales here in the jurisdiction of England and Wales, where solicitors have come undone by citing cases before a court or a tribunal where those cases have been found to not exist. They've been made up. And so when I talk about remembering one's professional obligations, what we have seen here is that the onus is on the individual to check that what you are presenting to the court is factual, it's correct. So otherwise you could face contempt of court proceedings. You will face disciplinary action if it is found that you have used incorrect citations before the court. And of course, the thing for me is, what I don't quite understand is, having spent all of that time in law school, paying all of that money, all of those years studying, and okay, I know it's about efficiency, I know it's about effectiveness, some of this has been driven by clients, but why we as lawyers would rely solely on technology to give us information that we could check. So it's a cautionary tale that actually humans are still needed to check the information that's being presented by these LLMs and so forth.
We met during Legal Tech Talk, and you were speaking there as well, mostly about the risks associated with technology and artificial intelligence. Recently, I was in Singapore when I met a lot of lawyers from Global South. Countries like Cambodia or Thailand are afraid that they will not be involved enough in the race with technology. So AI will not be implemented, adopted in these countries. I can imagine an ordinary person who can't afford a lawyer but can have an access to legal AI. Do you think that artificial intelligence is not only the risk but also maybe a benefit and a chance to democratize law, or is it a threat to justice? works?
I mean, absolutely. The UK government is backing artificial intelligence within the justice system to plug that gap as to access to justice. And we know that increasingly access to justice, to good quality legal advice, is becoming further and further out of reach to the ordinary person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, where we had before, where people would jump on Google and put in, their legal question was, whatever, and Google would spit back out at them what Google thought the answer was, or you'd get the individual who'd go down the pub and, get their answer, their advice down the pub. We now have that with this technology. My concern is that, first of all, you have to know how to use that technology. So what I mean by that is that you have to know what you're inputting, because you're only going to get back what you have put in and asked it. It's not going to know the nuances of your case unless you tell it, or the question, the advice that you are seeking, unless you tell it. And this government has suggested that AI, artificial intelligence and so forth is going to cure the backlog. We have huge backlogs of cases within our criminal courts. Cases are being listed into 2028, 29. That is a huge amount of time to be waiting to have your case heard if you are on bail or you are up before a criminal charge, on remand, waiting in prison. That's a long time. But I have yet to be convinced as to how artificial intelligence is going to cure the backlog. But I absolutely understand and respect that there is space there for artificial intelligence to try and plug some of the gap that has been left by lack of funding and resources, and will enable access to justice. So for lots of those countries that you mentioned, of course, but my concern is that in the race to get ahead, to embrace artificial intelligence, with the lack of global regulation, because it's only really the EU, and I think China is another one, that has any real regulation that deals with artificial intelligence. Because the speed at which we are told, and of course we understand, that to what this technology is being developed, makes it almost impossible to have regulation in place. But I don't think that that is good enough. There have to be absolute guardrails to ensure that this technology that's being embraced by almost everyone is not being to the detriment of society or to justice if it's deployed within our justice system, or to human beings. And what we're seeing here in the UK is actually at the junior end of the workforce, unemployment is rising. So as jobs are being lost to artificial intelligence, humans are being displaced in terms of their job prospects. So we have to adjust as well as a global nation, and indeed as nations.
So what are the guardrails you mean? What are these points that you cannot cross in our society?
So here in England and Wales, the United Kingdom, we have certain legislation within the Equality Act 2010 that says you can't discriminate against someone on the basis of protected characteristics, race, gender, sexuality, religion, and so forth. All of those things, but those are pockets of legislation. But in our quest, in our race to get ahead, the concern is that as this intelligence becomes super and super more intelligent, that my concern is that the poorer, the more vulnerable of our society is going to be left behind, because they're not going to be able to afford to embrace this technology, nor will they have the tools to use this technology. And we've already got subscription-based LLMs that some people, we've got free sites, but there is a difference between those who are prepared to pay for it and those who are left behind, and of course those who don't know how to use this technology in the first place. And of course, what we are seeing when you build in algorithms even more into this space is that radicalism that's being driven by algorithms. So in lots of spaces that actually the more radical your view or the things you say, the more likes you get, the more popular, how algorithms are placing your content and so forth, and monetizing that content. So my concern is around the detriment that can be done if there is not proper guardrails in place, and to some of that information that we are being told that's incorrect. So we've seen here a number of high-profile cases following rioting last year where people were placing things on social media that turned out to be inaccurate or inflammatory, and of course they were subject to criminal sanction.
Your 5 AI ethics principles emerged from years of consultations, and you consulted them with many lawyers. What was the most surprising discovery during those conversations with lawyers?
I think what was the most surprising, certainly when I started this discussion, and these principles were a few years ago now, and things have moved on so much so. But as I say, the one thing that we've got to be cognizant of is actually our responsibilities, obligations and duties as lawyers. And I think it was when I started talking about risk, lots of people hadn't considered the risk. They hadn't, because it was a technology that was kind of over there. It wasn't really within their purview. And now, of course, a couple of years down the line, we've absolutely seen how it has become an everyday part of our lives. But the concern is, of course, around cost and some being left behind because they're not embracing that technology. But it certainly was, how is artificial intelligence going to reshape the way we practice as lawyers? And of course, a couple of years ago, we were saying it's not going to affect the junior end of the profession. But absolutely, in terms of drafting contracts, in terms of research, all those sorts of things, we are absolutely seeing it take over in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the outputs.
So coming to this replacement of jobs, what do you think about it? I see people being replaced by AI, especially juniors who start very often with mundane tasks because it's the best way to learn how to practice law. What do you think about the whole situation?
There is no denying that there is anxiety within not just the professional and financial services as to the absolute impacts of artificial intelligence. It's there, it's happening. As you say, we've seen it. I think as people my advice is that start to upskill yourself in terms of the new skills, the new ways of working. And we've already seen some countries, I believe the UAE has part of the deal that they have done, that it will be added to the school curriculum, artificial intelligence. And there are other countries that are embracing artificial intelligence and trying to upskill their citizens in terms of how to use it. And I do think that certainly in this jurisdiction that more has to be done by the government to ensure that people are not left behind. Because as we see that technology, these days, it is very difficult to speak to a human being. If you have an issue, if you have a complaint, you're pushed online for everything to either speak to a chatbot. And the difficulty is if your complaint or your concern issue is not within the parameters of what that chatbot has been programmed to do, then you are disconnected, you're left out, you go nowhere, you cannot go past go sort of thing. So it is imperative that we learn the skills, we re-equip ourselves with the skills and resources. But I also think that there is a responsibility on governments to ensure that citizens are not left behind and that they don't roll out this technology that assumes everybody is embracing it and has the potential to embrace.
Is it really possible to learn it if there is such a high speed of the AI development? I'm AI and law researcher, and I'm very often lost because what I learned half a year ago, now it's out of date. So I wonder if it's really possible to learn and study. What's your point of view on that?
No, absolutely. The pace of this technology is just absolutely amazing. And of course, you would have seen some of the big tech companies who are in a race with each other as to, the super intelligence of their AI. But even they are slowing down in terms of the hiring. But the money that has been pushed out in terms of this technology, there were lots of people, startups that were being hired. They hadn't even produced a product yet, but the money that was being poured into them. But I do believe that there is a responsibility on the tech companies to ensure, and as I say, we do have some free subscription-based LLMs, but equally there are those that are behind a paywall. And my concern is that even if you utilize the free space, going back to what I said earlier, you still need to know how to use it, and therefore the impetus I would feel is not only on the government, it's the responsibility of the tech companies and us individually to try and learn as much as we can about this technology. But I don't have the answer in terms of the pace. How do we keep pace with it? Because, a couple of years ago when I first started talking about AI, I was given a speech and I decided to incorporate AI into that speech, it took me over a month to write that section on artificial intelligence, because no sooner than I penned something or went to sleep, by the time I woke up, it was out of date. So that is the difficulty. But I also think there is a responsibility on the tech companies to give more back. When was the last time, in terms of more back to humanity, given the amounts of money that's being made, the impact of this technology, what are they doing to solve some of our global issues? What are they putting into the pot of humanity?
So one more question about worries. Online justice sounds futuristic, but it's already happening. I was in June at ICAI, International Conference of AI and Law, and there was a presentation about 70% of Brazilian judges using LLMs, most of them free LLMs, to solve the cases, to decide, to research. It was really surprising. What worries you most about how courts are starting to use digital technologies? Because we hear very often about lawyers using AI, hallucinated cases, and so on, the one you mentioned as well. But what about judges, courts using AI to decide?
Well, the obvious question for me is that, given the example that you've just given, why do we need judges? If you can go and, use the same technology to produce the same judgment and decision, then what is the role of judges within that system? Here in England and Wales, judges have been given guidance as to the use of artificial intelligence, and it does not cover decision making. It's very limited in its capacity. They use Microsoft Copilot to obviously assist them with certain things, but it is not in the example that you use. My concern, of course, is that convenience might eclipse fairness. And digital courts can obviously be empowering. It can be absolutely empowering to get online. We have something here called the single justice procedure, where if you're issued with a train fare, you've forgotten to buy your train ticket and you get a fine or something like that, you go online, tick, 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 and rather than going to court, you have a sanction that's issued against you. The concern that we have issued over the years has been whether people actually understand the implications of ticking a box. That it could lead to a criminal sanction, a penalty, that it may have to be disclosed on a future mortgage application, in a future job application. Do people actually understand what it is that they are pleading guilty to or not? And one of the things that the Law Society certainly has advocated for is that there should be greater signposting of these online justice systems. But also, if you don't have Wi-Fi, and there are huge swathes up and down the United Kingdom where Wi-Fi does not feed into people's homes, is not accessible, how do you connect with all of this? How do you create a justice system that is quick but could be exclusionary if, as I said going back earlier, that you are being forced online? And if you have Wi-Fi, internet and so forth, what about the infrastructure? What about the tools, the resources needed for that? And we still have a large adult population that do not know how to use the technology, even if they had access to Wi-Fi and they had the infrastructure.
That's really worrying. If AI can analyze thousands of cases in seconds, will the lawyer of future will be AI whisperer or something completely different? I mean, what's your prediction about future of legal profession?
Well, I do think that, we're probably seeing signs of AI whispering already, given the citations that I mentioned earlier about a couple of lawyers who've gone before courts and been sanctioned for use of fake submissions and case citations. I think what it's going to boil down to is that there has to be an understanding of how AI tools work and what you are using it for. I don't believe, well, certainly last week and maybe earlier this morning, unless something's happened, I do believe that there will always be a role for humans in this whole space. But I'm also cognizant of what I'm hearing in terms of the technology, and it's becoming more and more super intelligent. I do believe that we have to, as this technology takes speed, it gains momentum. We have to rely on and fall back on ethics and empathy judgment, all of those things, putting things into context. Why do people come to lawyers? They come to lawyers. So it's all good and well getting that information online, and there will always be people who will want to get their information from online. But equally, there'll be people who will want to test that information that they've got online in front of a human being, or indeed they will want to get a second opinion. They will want that human voice in pursuit of justice. And I do believe that's where we will come in. But I have no doubt that it's going to be that they will work in parallel with each other. But as I say, my concern is that how these LLMs work, these AI works, is the data that's being put in. And if you are only putting in certain data, you will only get out certain information, certain decisions. It will spit out the biases, the biases, the opinions, the views of those who are doing the programming. So, for instance, we know that technology, that the AI technology, LLMs, is male-dominated. It discriminates at the moment. It cannot recognise between certain skin colour. It's about the information that's being put in, the data it's being fed. And my concern is that actually the stuff that it's spitting out, that it doesn't exclude people unfairly.
Let me dig more deeper. Do you predict more lawyers will be needed or less? Will be only verifying what are the outputs, or if the outputs are right or wrong? Just few of us. There are some predictions even more lawyers are necessary because people have greater access to law via legal tech or AI legal tech, and then more lawyers would be necessary to help with these outputs. What's your prediction about the future of legal profession with AI?
Well, I mean, there is no doubt that there is going to be an upsurge in litigation around all of this, legal tech, AI, whatever. There is going to be, because there is going to be fallout somewhere. But of course, lots of this is driven by clients who want to see, it's money driven, in as much that clients want efficiency, they want effectiveness. So they will push in certain respects for this technology to be utilized, because as you said, you can put something in, you can put a question in, it can spit out an answer within seconds that may have taken lawyers hours, days. And that's what we live in, a now society, that people want this information. They want answers here and now. If somebody sends you an email and you don't reply to it, within, a couple of hours, people are anxious that their email hasn't been received or you're ignoring them. It's those sorts of things. But a big worry of mine is that laziness, that lack of creativity. Mm-hmm. And earlier I was reading something about, certainly here, that people are losing the skill of reading because the technology is doing everything for them. Just as lots of us have lost the art of handwriting with a pen because of the technology. I mean, I struggle sometimes to hold a pen and write properly with any legible handwriting. But it's all those sorts of things that I think that certainly in this country that we are not prepared or haven't prepared ourselves enough for the impact of this technology that is certainly coming down the line. So I do think to a certain extent that there will be possibly more work. I mean, if you are arrested and you are going before a court or you're at the police station, do you want a human being sat next to you, whispering in your ear, giving you advice, or do you want to be talking to a computer screen and saying, what if, what if, what if? Because the big caveat at the moment is accuracy, is, whether or not what you are being told is accurate and is truthful.
We learn very rarely from history, but if you could go back to 2020, knowing what you know now about AI development, what would you tell the legal community to better prepare for this revolution?
Well, let me take you back. I mean, certainly in 2020, what the COVID pandemic did in 2020 was get the legal profession, certainly the solicitor profession, to embrace technology in 48 hours, which possibly would have taken us 10 years to do.
Yes.
So grateful to the pandemic in that respect. But lots of people were caught out. They didn't have the infrastructure. And as I say, the ability to access Wi-Fi and so forth remains a big issue for lots of businesses up and down the country. But I would say start learning and and start shaping the narrative, the discourse, the disruption. Don't wait to be disrupted. Be part of the design of it all. And of course, we are seeing more incubators come on board. We are seeing legal tech, absolutely. And as you say, we met at London Legal Tech Talk. And, to see the amount of people in that room, the buzz in the room, the talk in the room. But what we're also seeing is that there are lots of people in the legal tech space who are not lawyers. And so, they will have a different view as to how they're shaping this technology. And it's important that we as lawyers have a voice in shaping it. And as I say, being part of that design.
I think that's a great closing reflection. Stephanie, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. You've reminded us that adopting AI is not only a technical challenge, but also a human one. And it's very rare voice nowadays in this race of AI, legal tech, money, unicorns. So it's rooted in ethics, trust, and responsibility. Thank you very much for this voice.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to Monday Bagel, share this episode with colleagues, and join the conversation about how the law and technology can evolve together. Thank you and bye-bye.